You remember the look in her eyes, not the first time she smiled, but the first time she didn't. Something cold passed between you then. Not anger, not boredom, just absence. Like she had already buried the version of you she once adored. And you smiled anyway, didn't you? As if your kindness could resurrect desire. As if love could be begged for through effort. But effort is the stench of desperation. She smelled it the moment you gave too much. The altar you built from your sacrifices was not sacred to her. It was pathetic. You wrapped your soul in obedience, made your intentions transparent, and called it intimacy. But she only wanted mystery. She only bowed to the man who didn't flinch when she withdrew. You forgot the sacred rule that which reveals itself too easily is never worshipped. And now, when she walks past you, it's not rage that rises, it's shame. Shame for giving her what she never asked for. Shame for loving her louder than she loved you. Shame for becoming the kind of man she was never drawn to, even if she once said she would be. But you knew this. Somewhere deep, you always knew. She never asked for your devotion, but she devoured it. You became the offering on the altar she never built. She did not summon you. You arrived already kneeling, with eyes wide, voice soft, gestures calculated to soothe. You placed your heart into her open hands like a stray animal waiting to be petted. But she was not reaching for a pet. She was watching for a storm. You, in your eagerness to be chosen, forgot the first cruelty of attraction that desire is not granted to those who beg, but to those who withhold. And still, you carved your efforts into sacred shapes, good morning texts like prayers, planned dates like offerings, patience mistaken for virtue. But the altar was yours alone. She never worshipped there. She watched you build it, curious, flattered, perhaps even touched, but never moved, never transformed. Because devotion, when unearned, repels. You confuse labor with love, service with seduction, presence with power, and each gesture, though genuine, whispered a truth you didn't dare speak. I hope this makes me enough. And that hope, that trembling little need, was the stench in your offering. She felt it before you spoke it, the weight of your gaze, the subtle tension in your laughter, the need to be seen as good. You see, men who need to be seen as good forget how quickly women learn to wield that need. Not consciously, no. It's older than thought. It's instinct. A man who needs to be adored gives away leverage with every compliment, every concession, every whatever makes you happy. And slowly, her eyes stopped glowing when you entered the room. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you were trying to do everything right. You became predictable, safe, tame. And women do not crave safety the way you think they do. They crave mystery first, challenge second. Safety comes third and only after the fire has already been lit. But you brought the blanket before the flame. You mistook comfort for desire, and in doing so, you disappeared. You buried your edge, your danger, your solitude, all so she would never feel fear, never feel lack, never feel the possibility of losing you. But in protecting her from loss, you robbed her of the thrill, the sacred chaos, the dance between longing and uncertainty. She never got to miss you because you were always there, and what is always there becomes invisible. You told yourself it was love, but it was fear. Fear dressed as loyalty. Fear painted over with phrases like emotional availability and being the bigger man. But it wasn't bigger, it was smaller. It was you folding inwards, sanding down every sharp edge until nothing of you remained but softness. And softness, in the absence of strength, becomes weightless. A cloud of kindness she could no longer touch. She didn't break your heart. She simply stepped around it, confused by its insistence on always being open, always being available, always being ready to receive her even when she gave nothing back. You think you were punished for being good, but no, you were punished for being forgettable, for being a man who made himself too easy to consume. You gave her everything, and in doing so, you left her nothing to earn. And women, no matter how sweet, how sincere, how modern, still measure value by what must be earned. The pedestal you placed her on was not romantic, it was insulting. You stripped her of the joy of conquest. You made her feel like a prize rather than a player. You offered yourself like a gift, already wrapped, already labeled before she even realized she wanted one. And she did want something, but not what you became. She wanted the man you were before you knew you had a chance, the one who wasn't watching her reactions like a mirror, the one who laughed without apology, spoke without filter, vanished without warning. That man, the uninvested you, that's the one who caught her attention, not the version you built in response to her preferences, because preferences lie. She may say she wants softness, but what moves her is the tension, the uncertainty, the gravity of a man who doesn't orbit. You became the sun, shining, reliable, warm, but she was a woman made for moons. She wants to circle, to chase, to guess. You gave her no reason to guess. You gave her the whole story before she finished the first chapter, and once she knew the ending, she closed the book. Your mistake was not your heart, it was your surrender. You surrendered before war was ever declared. You called it vulnerability, but it was self-erasure. You think your transparency was a virtue, but it was a confession that you needed her more than you needed yourself. And that is the one need she could never respect. Because the moment she feels your center is no longer yours, she will abandon it, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. The feminine does not bow to the desperate. It dances with the dangerous, and danger does not explain itself. But you explained everything. You told her what you felt, what you feared, what you hoped. You showed her the blueprint of your mind, the map of your emotions, the structure of your longing. And once she saw the architecture, she saw the weakness in the foundation, the cracks, the compromises, the corners you cut in your own soul just to make room for her approval. She didn't walk away because you failed. She walked away because you vanished. Because the man who once stood before her with fire in his eyes and distance in his tone, that man turned into a mirror reflecting her needs. And no woman, no matter how lost, wants to fall in love with her own reflection. She wants you, but only if you remain yourself, unshaken, uncompromising, unafraid to let her go. You were none of those things, and yet you were everything she said she wanted, and still she stopped desiring you. That contradiction haunts you. It loops in your mind like a broken spell, because part of you knows it wasn't real. Her words were never commandments. They were confessions of what made her feel safe, not what made her burn. And you listened to the safety. You ignored the silence between her words. You built a persona out of her stated desires, and in doing so, you became a ghost, a polite, present, palatable ghost. Now you sit in the ruins of your effort, wondering what went wrong. But the truth is brutal and ancient. She didn't reject you. She rejected the version of you that rejected himself. The altar you built was not burned. It was ignored, because it was never sacred to begin with. You thought love was something you could earn, but love, real love, the kind that grips the spine and ignites the soul, that love is not earned. It is commanded. It rises not from effort, but from essence. And essence does not chase. It does not explain. It does not kneel. You are not here to be good. You are here to be real. And if that reality is too much, too sharp, too wild, then let it be. Better to be abandoned for your fire than adored for your ashes. The more you tried to be good, the more she hungered for the wolf you buried. Weakness wore the mask of loyalty, and she spat it out. You thought self-restraint would earn respect. You believed that suppressing your instincts, your hunger, your anger, your silence would make her feel safe. And you were right. In part, she did feel safe. But safe is not sacred. Safe is not seductive. Safe is what she seeks in her brother, in her dog, in her therapist, not in her lover, not in the man she wants to follow into fire. You killed the wolf inside you to become the kind of man women say they want, and she mourned him, even if she never knew his name. His absence left a strange hollowness in you, and she could feel it, that subtle void where risk used to live. She didn't stop wanting you because you were bad. She stopped wanting you because you were harmless, and the harmless are the first to be forgotten. You cloaked yourself in what you thought was maturity. You made yourself smaller, softer, slower. You spoke with caution. You removed threat from your tone, tension from your posture. You replaced presence with politeness, and each time you filtered yourself to be more agreeable, more digestible, more gentle. She felt it, the weightlessness, the void. You became a man no woman would fear, and therefore no woman could truly crave. You imagined your goodness would win her loyalty, but loyalty, true loyalty, is never given to the tame. It is given to the undeniable, and denial is what you offered. You denied your darker truths, the ones she would have instinctively respected, the ones that mark a man who doesn't explain himself, the ones that terrify, even as they attract. She did not want violence, but she wanted to feel what you could do if you had to, and you stripped her of that knowledge. You denied her the experience of being near a man who could walk away and would if she crossed too far. You gave her power, and she used it. You gave her worship, and she resented it. And now you sit in silence, confused by her coldness, tortured by her apathy, betrayed by her freedom as if she owed you warmth simply because you offered restraint. But she saw it all along, the hunger in your eyes, the buried scream in your chest, the rage you disguised as patience. You think she didn't notice. She did. She always does. But she said nothing. Because the unspoken bargain had already been struck, you would play the saint, and she would be your salvation. Except she never asked for that role. She didn't want to fix you. She wanted to feel you, and she couldn't. Not when every part of you had been softened, polished, bleached for the sake of acceptance. You turned yourself into a man who needed permission to act, and in doing so, you lost her. Because women are not drawn to weakness in a man. They are drawn to the struggle with that weakness, the refusal to be conquered by softness. The man who contains darkness without drowning in it, that is the man they remember. Not the one who avoids conflict, but the one who walks into it with teeth bared and eyes steady. You hid your teeth, you concealed your edges, and she could never trust what you refused to show. You thought, if I am gentle enough, kind enough, open enough, she will stay. But she wasn't watching your gentleness. She was watching your spine. She was searching for the tension that makes a man dangerous. Not because he is cruel, but because he is capable, and your capabilities were nowhere to be found. You called it love. She called it compliance. You called it sacrifice. She called it submission. You believed you were proving devotion, but all she saw was your fear, because only fear makes a man erase himself. Fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, fear of being misunderstood. You wrapped your identity in her preferences. You waited for her cues before speaking. You measured your every word, lest it push her away. And that very hesitation is what pushed her away. Because no woman can surrender to a man who already surrendered to her. She wanted to be taken not gently, but fully, and you approached her with apologies in your gaze. She wanted to feel your certainty, but you deferred, you waited, You asked, and she lost all desire to say yes. You see, the mask of powerlessness is not quiet. It screams through your eagerness, through your over-explanations, through your inability to say no, through the anxiety behind your jokes, through the smile you force when she disrespects you, through the silence you offer when she tests your edge. She tested you, of course she did, and you failed, not because you weren't enough, but because you refused to be. You pretended strength was control, but true strength is confrontation. True strength is knowing when to speak, when to leave, when to demand. And you demanded nothing. You accepted everything, and in doing so, you taught her to see you as optional. You taught her to doubt the very attraction she once felt, because you diluted it. Every time you avoided a hard truth, every time you lowered your gaze, every time you agreed to avoid friction, you drained the tension from the air. And without tension, there is no polarity, no spark, no sacred war between man and woman, just comfort. And comfort is the death of seduction. It is the burial ground of instinct. It is the final form of a man who once could have led but chose instead to be liked. Do you understand now? It wasn't your heart. It was your silence. The silence where your spine should have been. The absence of the storm. The lack of gravity. She drifted from you not because you were too much, but because you were never enough of yourself. You became a reflection of her moods, a servant of her expectations, a shadow of her power, and she felt it, even if she couldn't name it. She left you because she had to, because to stay would have been to deny her own instincts, and a woman who denies her instincts grows bitter. You may not have seen the bitterness, but it was already in her voice, in the flatness of her replies, in the way her body softened less and less around you. Her desire shrank in proportion to your self-erasure. You wanted her to choose you, but you gave her nothing to choose. No contrast, no presence, no resistance. You flattened yourself into agreement, and now you wonder why she craves the man who says less, offers less, tries less. You hate him, but you hate him because he has what you gave away: boundaries. Mystery, the ability to walk away. That is the man she cannot forget, because he didn't need her to remember him. He didn't give himself away. He made her come and take him. You gave her your truth in whispers, but gods are only worshipped when they remain hidden. She left you, not because you failed, but because you unveiled. You wanted her to see your soul, so you tore open your chest and offered it trembling, exposed, sincere. But a man who shows everything too soon forfeits his mystery, and mystery is not a luxury, it is a necessity. You believed that vulnerability was intimacy, that confession was closeness, that honesty would make you unforgettable, but it didn't. It made you known. And what is fully known cannot be mythologized. It can only be managed, explained, compared, forgotten. You became explainable. She could trace every line of your heart and find no secret chamber. And so she left, not in betrayal, but in silence. For what worshipper remains in a temple where the god reveals himself as merely human? You forgot the sacred structure of longing. It must have a veil. Desire survives in the space between knowing and not knowing. The glance, not the stare. The pause, not the speech. The man who is truly worshipped never narrates his own divinity. He lets her feel it. And in the void of what he withholds, she writes her own hunger. But you explained yourself too early, too thoroughly. You named your feelings. You revealed your plans. You exposed the machinery behind every gesture. And slowly, her enchantment died. Not because she stopped caring, but because you robbed her of the dream. There is a reason women return to the man who never gave them closure, the one who vanished without explanation, the one who left silence in his place. Because in that silence, she is haunted, she wanders, she revisits. She builds altars in her mind to what might have been. But you left her no questions, only answers, neatly arranged, kindly delivered, emotionally correct. She didn't walk away because you lacked depth. She walked away because you dug it up and handed it to her like a report card. You were proud of your transparency, but transparency is glass. And glass, once seen through, ceases to shimmer. You misunderstood the essence of presence. It is not in how much you say, it is in what you withhold. Power does not beg to be understood. It allows itself to be felt. You spoke of your past, your pain, your dreams, thinking this would bring her closer. But closeness is not built from access. It is built from tension, from restraint, from the unsaid. She didn't want your whole story. She wanted a symbol, a pulse she could chase, a boundary she could lean against. But you kept giving and giving until there was nothing left for her to reach for. In your urge to connect, you dissolved the very gravity she was drawn to. You believe she left because you weren't enough. No, she left because you gave too much and none of it asked her to rise. You carried the emotional labor. You did the explaining. You guided the conversation. You filled every silence. But silence is where the sacred lives. And in that sacred, the feminine awakens not by being fed, but by being summoned. And you never summoned her. You appeased. You comforted. You explained. A god does not explain himself. He waits. He observes. He speaks when the moment demands. His silence is not absence, it is invitation. It is space. It is the echo chamber of the soul. But your silence was filled with apologies, with attempts to be understood, with gentle rewordings to avoid offense. And in all that softness, she felt the unbearable truth that you needed her validation to exist. That your power was not sovereign, but conditional. Conditional on her gaze, on her approval, on her continued attention. And she saw it maybe not in words, but in weight. A woman always knows when a man is no longer his own. You thought you were being emotionally available. What you were was emotionally dependent. And dependency is the antithesis of worship. She cannot look up to what clings to her. She cannot desire what requires permission to be. The God she would have fallen for was inside you once the man who withheld. The one who did not seek to impress. The one who was whole without witness. But you replaced him with the good man, the nice man, the emotionally safe man, the open book. And no woman desires a man who reads himself aloud before she even opens the first page. You keep asking, what did I do wrong, as if love is a ledger, as if this were a math problem. But love is myth, not math. It is not calculated. It is conjured. It is not made by effort. It is drawn by energy. And the energy you gave her was too readable, too reachable, too resolved. She knew your wounds before she felt your strength. She heard your truth before she sensed your silence. You were never a mystery, and so she never got to become a seeker. That is what haunts you now. Not her absence, but your own. The part of you that once stood untouched, undivided, unafraid to be misunderstood, that part is what she could have worshipped. But he was buried under layers of politeness, self-disclosure, and emotional transparency. And now she remembers you as kind, as sweet, as well-intentioned, but not as necessary, not as unforgettable, not as the storm she couldn't predict. You gave her truth before she earned it. You bled on the first date. You confessed on the second. You surrendered on the third. And by the time she could feel the weight of your presence, it was already light, already revealed, already reduced. She never got to feel the ache of not knowing. The ache that makes a woman return to a man long after she's closed the door. That ache only lives in mystery, in restraint, in the man who doesn't need to prove he's good because he knows he's God. And you were the God once. In the way you moved, in the way you held your stare, in the moments before you believed you had a chance. But then you began to mold, to accommodate, to please, and every time you did, she felt it, that slow collapse of the divine, that quiet extinguishing of the fire, that sacred silence replaced with soft speech and soft boundaries, until she was no longer kneeling, until she was no longer watching, until she was already gone. She will not return, not to you, not as you are, because she cannot desire what has already undressed itself without being asked. She may remember you kindly, but she will not crave you, not unless you return to yourself, to the self that never needed her gaze to feel real, to the self that did not perform, did not explain, did not beg, to the self that once stood in silence and was worshipped for it. There is a room in her memory with no door. Inside it, a name she never speaks, a presence that did not try to stay, just a silhouette in smoke, a voice that never asked to be understood. You could have been that silence. You could have been the man she hears in her sleep, not because he said the right things, but because he didn't need to speak at all. But now she sleeps soundly because you made yourself clear. And clarity is not a memory. It is a conclusion. Next time, if there is a next time, don't hand her your soul. Let her steal it and never ask for it back.